All right, let's jump in. I'm excited to welcome today's speakers, Catalina Steenbakkers Galindo, Team Lead, Market Intelligence and Business Insights at Alexander Watson Associates, Elizabeth Sowle, Director, Product Line Management at Avery Dennison, Mcleod Williamson, Senior Director of Sales Americas at Tageos. And moderating this discussion today, we have Mike Hoft, Regional Sales Manager, Siegwerk Environmental Inc., and a member of our TLMI Technical Committee, where this session is brought to us from the TLMI Technical Committee. So from there, Mike, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Mcleod. Appreciate being here today with all these smart people and to talk about RFID. We should have a really good conversation about that. We've got Catalina Steenbakkers. I'm going to murder your name, even though we've talked several times. This is how I do it. And she's going to talk to us about AWA and their the market intelligence and business insights that they bring to the table. And she's going to give us a little breakdown of that project that they just got done doing first, and then we'll go over to Elizabeth and Mcleod. So with that, Catalina.
Thank you, Mike. Let me just share my screen. I hope everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Great. Like Mike said, I'm Catalina Steenbakkers. I'm team lead at of our market insights and business intelligence unit at AWA Alexander Watson Associates. So maybe first a little bit about AWA for those who don't know us. We are a market intelligence and business insights service and consulting firm who specialized in the specialty paper and film coating and converting industries, which includes pressure-sensitive materials, release liner, label product decoration, coating and laminating markets, and within these sectors, we also are expanding into the smart packaging, smart labeling, and RFID segments. So we've also recently acquired AIPIA. So we're now continuing forward under AIPIA and AWA for our anything related to RFID or smart labeling and packaging. So I'll be giving a brief overview of the pressure-sensitive RFID label market. RFID is broad and used in several applications. We looked specifically at those that are pressure-sensitive based, since that's kind of our expertise. So we wanted to build from there, but we are looking into expanding this research into other RFID applications and as well. So just giving some insights into the markets where it's used, regional dynamics, as well as some trends and challenges that the markets face. So if we look at the global RFID label market, we estimate that it's around, and again, pressure sensitive RFID label, it's around 25 billion units. With Asia dominating the market at about 65% of the global market, whereas North America and Europe have somewhere between 15 to 20% of the market, and South America and AME significantly smaller shares. We're seeing most of the development coming from the three larger regions, especially. So like I said, we estimated about 25 billion, and we expect that that will grow to approximately over 30 billion, closer to 35 by 2027. So overall, we're projecting that the market, the total global market, will grow at a rate of about 10.5 per year up until 2027. With Asia growing at the fastest rate at about 11.2%, and then North America and Europe behind this a little at around 9% over. So we're seeing growth is being, especially in Europe and North America, driven a lot by the pharmaceutical market, so by traceability required in the supply chains in that segment. more NFC adoption, omni-channel retail strategies from retailers, especially in North America. And though South America and AME are quite small, we do see growth potential there, but there's of course always a topic of investment and cost sensitivity in those regions. If we look at the RFID label market by end use segment, we see that the main market, of course, is retail. And this is primarily apparel and footwear, where we see the biggest use of RFID labels. However, we're seeing growth in other retail segments that are coming also from a smaller base. And especially, again, like I mentioned, in the US, it's really a big driver, more so than in Europe, what we're seeing here. Food and beverage is also a segment where we see a lot of potential growth coming in that segment. Transport and logistics, so supply chain, visibility and traceability are becoming very important. So these are then the growth by end use segment. So food and beverage, it's of course coming from a small base, so we have a bit of a higher growth rate, but that's where we're seeing a lot of potential. And then in the retail segments and healthcare as well, which would include pharmaceuticals. We look at the different technologies used, and I'm sure Elizabeth and Mcleod will be able to share a little bit more about this. I'm not the most technical person. But we've looked at the market in terms of the technology used for RFID. So the majority of it is UHF or ultra high frequency. It also expected to grow at a relatively fast rate. So this has been driven really by large scale deployments in apparel, logistics, and retail. It's mature or relatively mature technology. It's becoming more cost efficient. So this is really why it's the dominant technology. Then we have high frequency and near field communication, so NFC. We see this growing slightly faster. Again, coming from a smaller user base, but also coming from new use cases. In Europe, it's especially driven by the digital product passport, so the DPP, and brand protection initiatives. And then we have a very small share of sensor-enabled tags or RFID labels. These just provide a little more functionality to the label, but they are on the costlier side, so that's why we see it in a smaller share. It's not as widely used, but has a lot of growth potential. And this is just the growth by technology. So like I mentioned, especially sensor enabled where we see the most growth, but again, coming from a small starting point and base. But then UHF and HF growing at close to similar rates. We look at the trends for what's driving the RFID label market. So one is definitely just omnichannel retail. So just having better visibility in terms of inventory across all the different channels that retailers have. So RFID labels, help to improve stock accuracy and really know what you have in store and what needs to be ordered or what's selling very well, for example. We have regulations, of course. So in Europe, definitely the digital product passport has been a big driver, as well as regulations related to pharmaceutical supply chains, which are driving the implementation of RFID labels or other smart, intelligent labels. Logistics and e-commerce. Again, has to do a lot with supply chain. So supply chain really where we see the main driver and growth for RFID. Food and pharma regulations, as I mentioned. And then again, we are seeing the cost come down. which is definitely making it easier for companies to adopt this technology or evaluate whether it's a good fit for them. And then sustainability, there's two parts to it. It can be both a challenge because then, you get into the topic of, well, is this label recyclable or, is the material recyclable or the metal that's in there? So there's that topic. But then at the same time is you're improving kind of inventory and supply chains and making them more efficient. You're also, for example, in the food segment, you're going to have less food waste, hopefully, if you're able to properly implement this. And then barriers and challenges. So cost and economics, it's yes, the cost is coming down, but for companies, it can still be an investment because it's not just the tag, it's also the infrastructure, the software that's needed to, fully take advantage of the full ecosystem. Sustainability, like I mentioned, I think especially in Europe now we have this PPWR. And even in the US, there's more focus on EPR, so brands needing to be more accountable for what they're putting on their packaging. So that will definitely have an impact on, well, if I'm putting this on my package, is it going to affect the recyclability or anything like that? Integration challenges, so that goes again kind of hand in hand with cost. So, do I need to update anything to my current ecosystem, any investment that I have to make in terms of hardware, software, all of that are topics that are discussed when looking at this. Regulatory compliance. So it is a driver for adoption, but it can also be complex and not all companies have the resources to really adhere or comply to the regulations that are in place. So also a challenge for the market. Finally, consumer behavior. So you have RFID, which is more in the supply chain, but then like NFC tags are used more in consumer-facing roles. Does everyone, in theory, everyone should know how to use NFC because we use our phones with Apple Pay and such. But does that mean that I'm really gonna, scan an NFC tag on a wine bottle, for example, to get the information? So is it really worth the investment from a brand if a consumer is not going to take that next step to make use of this new technology? Finally, like I mentioned, we recently acquired AIPA. We'll be having a World Congress, Smart Packaging World Congress in May. So everyone, I invite you to register if you're interested in attending. And we are offering a 20% discount for TLMI members. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. And that would be it for me. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Catalina. Appreciate that's a lot of good information. AWA does that very, very well.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot for that. Now we'll step into our two esteemed, nice applause, esteemed guests today. We have Elizabeth Stowe and Mcleod Williamson. Elizabeth's with Avery Dennison and is one of the good folks over there. She's a director of product line management and product development, which is a lot. So what does that mean?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon. As you said, I'm Elizabeth Sowle. I'm the product director of intelligent labels at Avery Dennison, which is a fancy way of saying I look after our RFID products. So anything with RFID, creating the new designs, releasing those to market, and then also working with clients to make sure that we've got the right RFID products. Avery Dennison, I'm sure you've heard of us. We're kind of everywhere, but we are a material science and digital ID solutions company, and we make it easy for you to buy big rolls of paper and laminates. For converting, we're also making it easy for you to buy RFID inlays for your RFID label projects. So in my day-to-day work, I'm working with our teams to RFID enable many markets. Of course, we already talked in the chat about apparel retail. That's very common. If you go to most retailers in the US, you pick up a t-shirt, it's going to have a hang tag that has an RFID tag embedded to it. You can hold it up to the light and see it. That's really helping them know where their things are in the supply chain as they're coming through on trucks, even as sometimes when they're made in the factories. And then definitely in the stores, they can see what they're in stock on and what they need to replenish. So it really helps their sales. But there's a lot of other areas of the store. We have a challenge to RFID enable. They're a little bit more challenging. We can get into why, but really exciting opportunities there. So we're looking at that rest of the store, logistics, tracking packages for our UPSs and others, medical, and then food, which is mostly retail again, but again has its own adoption there as well. So thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And next is Mcleod Williamson, who's sales.
So that's good. Sales.
Director of sales at Tageos. Sorry. Going back and forth.
That's right.
Glad you're here. Tell us about
Glad to be here.
Tageos. Tell us about yourself and what brings you here.
Sure, absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm on the Americas sales team with Tageos. I've been in RFID for a little over 20 years, about 7 years with Tageos, and roughly a dozen years with Zebra Technologies. My day-to-day is one, kind of understanding the market space that you heard from Catalina about. We heard from Elizabeth about like how we apply RFID to those spaces. So understanding that, bringing that information back to our product team so they can work their magic and come out with inlays that work really well, but then also working with converters in the space to help them continue using, become really efficient at RFID. A little bit about Tageos. We're a French-based company. We started in about 2007. Initially, we came up with and patented a more sustainable way to make an RFID inlay. Not going to get into the details of that. I think we'll touch on it perhaps a little later. We've grown since then to be a global company with manufacturing sites on 3 continents, including here in the US, in North Carolina. And for us, go to market is very narrow. Going to market, we want to make inlays. We want to work with converters to help them produce the end product, whether it's a pressure sensitive label like we're talking about today, or embedding it into packaging that goes around the product. So thanks.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. So let's just get into it. I guess my first question is obviously, what is RFID? Should we start that simply? And then we'll bounce from there.
Sure. Well, I think the old joke from like 15, 20 years ago was, how do you spell RFID? So RFID, it is thankfully a little self-explanatory. RF has to do with radio frequency. So the way you're communicating is through a radio frequency signal, like your cell phone, like your radio. So it's a wireless communication, sending wireless energy. That's the RF part. The ID part means ID, a unique ID. There is basically what you're looking at for a tag perspective is there's an antenna and a chip, and that chip has a unique ID that can be respond back to the reader, so you know exactly what it is that you've got in front of you.
And
so
I'll just add a little bit to that because there's some benefits, right, that come with both the RF part and the ID part, right? Yeah, so sure. The RF, most people, you immediately think of, well, how does it compare to a barcode, right? From the RF part, it means I don't have to do it with a line of sight. I don't have a laser that's reading the black and white bars to decode something. That means I can go through boxes, through materials, sometimes through walls, and still pick up those items. The second major one is I can get multiple ones at once, right? So I can read hundreds, sometimes thousands, let's say hundreds for today, of items at one time. But that ID part means that all of his items are, like Elizabeth said, unique. If you think about a UPC code, when you pick up that t-shirt that she talked about, the UPC code is going to be the same for every single t-shirt you pick up, right? But the RFID code is going to be unique for each one. That allows you to count how many of those t-shirts you have, which allows you to do the inventory, all of the things that you get for it.
Okay. So what's the current failure rate? We got a question from the audience. What's the current failure rate of the at the retailer level for RFID and these tags?
So if you talk about at the retailer level, right? So if I'm on the store floor and I am taking inventory, doing a cycle count, right? Everybody's going to start by saying, I've got to have 100%. But when you get down into it, that's not exactly true. You're going to drive benefit somewhere sub 100, right? If you're using barcodes and you're looking at inventory accuracy from cycle counts and perpetual inventory in your system, you might be down in the 60 to 70s if you're being honest with yourself. RFID can get you into the high 90s. We're not going to say 100%, but you can be in the high 90s. And that in and of itself is a huge benefit, and why some of the really big retailers that we know about have gone that route.
Mm-hmm. So that's a huge deal. What inhibits RFID from working? So if I got a label, I'm going to put it on a package, maybe a bottle of water or something like that. Can I do that, or is that an issue, or what do you guys think?
Yeah, so that's where we get into talking about which RFID inlay or tag are you going to select, because each one is made for its own use case. We have certain ones that work really well on clothing, t-shirts, jeans, etc., but it is an antenna, and as you put it near different materials, that material has a dielectric property. That is, how dense is the material? Is it going to detune that antenna and make it not read as far? And that's where you might have to have challenges of picking out the right tag. So when we talk about the rest of the store or food, if you have liquid, that's going to really absorb energy and detune the tag. So you need a very special tag for that. If you have something near metal, you're going to need a spacer somehow, because the metal itself will block the energy. So there is some limitations. I think the quick ones, and Mcleod, you could share what you want, but yeah, rubber, glass, water. Those will be basically absorbing energy, really slowing it down. And then metal, of course, is a blocker. So those are the tough to tag materials, but we have ways around it.
Yeah, so I think I'd add to that so, Elizabeth and her product team, my product team, they're dealing with that all the time, and they're really good designers. And while we're never going to change the laws of physics, we're certainly going to make it as easy as possible to have an inlay that's going to perform as it needs to around those materials. And that involves both designing the antenna and then where do we place that label on the packaging of those materials.
Yeah. And maybe I can add something. And first, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were researching our report as well, I think something that was mentioned a bit was also rain flooding. So when it's just the receiver is overflooded with too many RFID signals, which can also cause some errors.
Interference.
Good stuff. So another question that came in, how would a converter who has never been involved in RFID get started in understanding it and possibly start offering it to existing clients? What's the path for somebody that's not been in it before to get in it, and not look like a fool? We all don't want to look like fools. Happens.
It's a big question for sure, right? And I think we could spend the rest of our hour talking about it. But I think some of the short answers, I'll get started and pass it along. It's understanding your market, right? Who are your customers? Where are you today? Where do you want to be? What is the acceptance or adoption rate in that market space? So what is that opportunity for you, right? So what's the business part of it first? If there's a business opportunity, okay, then what's the blocking and tackling I need to do to get there? Understanding the technology is something that at a high level is necessary. At a deep level, there's no need to get into the weeds. You have people you're looking at right now that can help you with that, because we live in the weeds and we can just tell you what you need to know. And then it's okay. What kind of volumes am I looking at? There's several different ways that you can actually get equipment and start integrating that into your manufacturing processes. But I'll slow down there and let other voices come in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well said. I think, as you said, once you identify that there is a market opportunity for you to actually get involved, I think the short answer is pick up the phone, call us, talk to us, because there are some nuances there. There's some equipment you want to make sure you can understand whatever that converting process is, and then the quality audit piece would be a little bit new as well. But that's exactly part of the adoption, is how I think we're all very focused in the community of how do we make this easy for more people to adopt and create RFID labels. So there's a lot of help out there for everyone.
Okay, so if I'm a small converter, right, and I've got a Mark Andy press and that's the deal, and I don't have do I have to? I guess this is a question. Do I have to find some machine that'll take that chip and attach it to the antenna? Am I printing the antenna? What exactly? I see it at the store, but how do I realize that, I guess?
So I think Elizabeth, you might have a slide that shows the different formats of antennas and inlays that might be useful in answering that question. I don't know,
Yes.
Mcleod, if I'm asking you to jump to it.
Probably that third slide I had. So if we go, so yeah, these are pictures of RFID you might find in the wild. There we go, right there. So here are the formats you could buy from, us or other inlay providers, but you have basically called it a dry inlay, a wet inlay, or we do sell labels, simple labels. So the dry inlay is just like that. It has a carrier and antenna with a chip attached. The wet, it's the same thing, but it's been converted into little clear sticky labels that can then be label applied into your converting process, or you can just use the simple label there. And so they come in different material types. So very common is a PET carrier for the dry and the wet. But we also have a lot more offerings now that are more sustainable with paper-based, which is very popular. And even at Avery Dennison, we have a printed fabric label. So if you get into the fabric label business as well.
Okay, so
sorry, Mike, I was going to say that typically the most common way for a converter to get started would be that middle format there, right? So you can take what we mean by wet is it's that clear substrate with adhesive on the back. It's easy to delam that, apply it to the back of the face stock or to your transfer tape or something, and then just make that into now an RFID label. And that's what's done for most people as they're getting started, and that can be done inline or offline.
Okay, so just a simple delam relam kind of situation. Okay, and the first one, the white one, actually has everything on the back of it. Is that correct?
That's
correct. Has the antenna and everything. So it's just basically a label that they get from you, and then you put the art on top of it.
Yeah, they can print it. Exactly.
So it doesn't really take anything. Is nip pressure or anything like that? Can you mess them up running them through your press? Can you crush them?
It is possible, and it's something to pay attention on the rollers and the diameter of the rollers and those types of things. And again, that's guidance that we can provide and help people not do that sort of thing, because it's something to consider, but I wouldn't see it as a roadblock, right?
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. So is that, I mean, it raises your failure rate. If I'm just a guy, right, and I'm throwing it on press and I'm going to run it for the first time, what am I going to expect for a failure rate? Like what you're talking about with the chips, 90%, 95%, or is it 80?
So we like to talk about yield rather than failure rates, because that's the positive rather than the negative.
Kind of negative.
So, you're going to get a guarantee, depending on who you talk to, of probably 99 to 99.5%. You're going to get an average yield of probably the high 99s. And then sometimes, whether you're in this middle one or the one to the right, you may have the option of getting 100% good from your inlay manufacturer, right? From there, if you have your press dialed in right, we wouldn't expect much drop off at all. We would expect that yield to stay very high coming through. If you're dropping more than 1% from there, it'd be something that you would want to take a look at.
Wow. So it's really not that big of a deal, is what you're saying.
15, 20 years ago, it wasn't that way, right? But
right.
The chips have gotten smaller. The manufacturing process has gotten better, and that's why we're seeing such better and higher yields.
Okay. We got some questions here I need to catch up on. Any interference issues printing LEP on pre-inserted pressure sensitive stock?
And sorry, I'm not familiar with LAP. Apologies, I'm not a printer.
Printing LED inks? How about that? Are there any like LED or UV or water-based or solvent? Are there any issues with any of that?
There shouldn't be any issues with any inks. The only real issues we've seen over the years is if you get a very specific like thermal head, if you're doing a thermal transfer, a thermal direct, and you've got a very aggressive edge on that thermal print head, you have to be a little careful. But even so, today's chips, as Mcleod was saying, is much better than it is. But just
Okay.
any kind of ink-based standard spray, it should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. He clarified photographic printing. So I guess digital print or something like that.
Which I haven't heard that that's been a problem.
I mean,
And
unless you've got
HP presses.
Unless you've got a static voltage that's much higher than I would expect it would be, then I wouldn't see an issue.
So static's an issue.
A lot of static is an issue. Again, something that's gotten a lot better, but there's also really easy ways to mitigate ESD in your converting process to make sure it doesn't happen. If you take a few basic measures, we don't see that as an issue most of the time, especially if you're monitoring humidity, which you may already be because of the other raw materials that you have.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I've got the label off the press. I got my roll of labels. It's got RFIDs on it. Do I need to handle it a special way? Can I just have my guy throw it around? Do we have to treat it like a baby?
Don't drop it. Please don't.
Don't drop it.
No, that is true. If you drop it on edge, there's a possibility you might have a couple of those chips inside, just depending on mechanics. It's hard to say that they're all protected if you're dropping them. So they're not meant to be dropped. ESD,
Right.
make sure you're handling that, of course, cleanliness. But the handling is much more secure than it was 15, 20 years ago.
You putting them in like stack-free bags, the roll?
We used to.
Yeah.
But today that would be more just for kind of cleanliness, so you don't get any dust or anything in there, than opposed to ESD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the percentage of price increase between a label with RFID and a label without? What's that going to cost me to do this? Or what can I guess? I guess what can I charge for this? I mean.
So always a fun question, right? Always a fun question, right?
Yeah.
Because there is a difference, and the conversation is, it's commercial. Am I getting the value out of it? Is my customer deriving value that's going to support that difference in cost? And it could be, depending on your label, be maybe 2 or 3 times the cost of one without RFID. What I will say is that number today is so much less than it was even just a couple of years ago, because of economies of scale, because of evolution of the chips themselves, right? We've gotten to the point where, for me, and I'm sure for you too, Elizabeth, where we were 10, 12 years ago, we thought we'd never get where we are today, but we're here now, right? And so for me, it's much less of a barrier. It's still more, and it's always going to be more because you have more in it, right? But if for our audience, if you haven't shopped around in even a couple of years, it's worth getting some quotes, some offline quotes to see, because I think you'll be surprised at what it is today.
Okay. Another question: how can suppliers of adhesives and film substrates label stocks? How can they get involved in the value chain? No, right.
I was going to defer to Elizabeth on that one. I'll take a stab if you want.
Right. Tell your competitors how to make this work.
It's a tough one. I think I'm going to defer to you.
Yeah.
My thought would be, there are different. All of those raw materials go into different types of use cases. Mm-hmm. So if you have those different use cases, what are the ones where RFID has adoption rates and provides value, and what are some that don't? So if you've got a pharma grade adhesive that has anti-leaching certification or something along those lines. Let's add, and that now if we add a small RFID antenna to that and you put it on a vial or a syringe, there's a market for that, right?
Right.
If you make a face stock that has something that's specific for that, I think those are ways to do it. So kind of again, back to what we said about just generally entering the market, where do you play? Is RFID today in those marketplaces? And then partner up with a provider that can work with you and help you ask the right questions when you have the conversations with your customers.
Right. Because this is, our audience is the tag and label manufacturers. All these guys are engineers, everybody, and they're always coming up with better, bigger ways to do things. So they can get in to RFID right now, bam, get with you guys and get going. Okay. Then they're going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, I could run this. How fast can I run this? Because now I'm hampered by speed. So I don't want to buy, I want to apply or I want to do it as quickly as possible. So is it faster? Can I do this quicker myself? Right? Printing the antenna or buying the antenna with putting the chip on. Can I buy the chip? Can I create it myself quicker in line and then save myself money? Right? And how do I do that? Right?
Yeah, I would say at the start, you definitely want to go the partner route, because I see that chip connection itself is its own engineering study. It is a very deep area. There are definitely a lot of learnings. The equipment itself is fairly expensive, so the cost of entry and the knowledge needed is pretty high. So I'm not saying you can't get into it. Definitely, we will see more players get into chip attach, but I think that's definitely partner with someone who is established on inlay manufacturing to start with to get off the ground. And I would expect you to sit there for at least 10 years, unless that's what you want to do. If you hey, I'm going to open up a new tag shop, then that's great. Yeah, but
and to that, how many scientists do you have at Avery that are working on that chips and how, all around the world? What's your staff look like? Because we're just sitting here and it's just three of us, right? But behind you are how many people?
That would be hard to quantify. So we have an entire platform team of engineers that's looking at chip attach and converting. And then we've got our R&D folks who are looking at that design piece. So the design of itself, I think we owe ourselves a quick chat about the design of the inlays. That Mcleod brought a slide about. And I see something here, like which tags, what are these antenna designs that I'm attaching the chip to? And that's its own art form as well. So there's, of course, the chip attach itself takes quite a bit of time. And then the design of these tags, each of these shapes are specific for some use. They are a size that fits in some label, that fits on some item, and is tuned exactly for whatever the expected item dielectric is there. So I would say that's also a large group of people. And yeah. Mcleod, any comments on this one?
And we've got a team that designs antenna traces all day. We've got a team that understands exactly how we then attach and bond that chip to these antenna traces. Somebody asked about suppliers of the chips. So there's a couple in the UHF space. There are a couple of major suppliers. Mostly you're going to see Impinj and NXP for those. There are additional suppliers there. When you get into different frequencies, there's additional suppliers too, but those are kind of the kind of household names, right? But yeah, if you look at these, you've got kind of a workhorse, the top left, right? The top left, correct? Moving down, you've got what you don't normally see as a round design, and that's because it's made to go on the cap of an item. As you move to the right, you're going to see kind of consistencies. Generally speaking, you're going to have that black dot, which is the chip, and waves coming out from it. Over on the right, the biggest one, it was made specifically for tire tracking. The one in the middle was made specifically for, I mentioned those vials before, right? And so our job is to make these purpose build those, right, Elizabeth, and make them for the use cases that are out there. And then when we partner with you guys, the converters, say, okay, you have this opportunity. Here's the 1 to 5 inlays that are gonna meet that performance wise, and then let's talk about how it gets integrated into a label. And I do want to say that, as Elizabeth talked about, bonding chips and onto antenna and antenna design, there are certifications for that, and they're both for the performance of that inlay, but also the quality of your manufacturing process, so that every inlay has that same performance, right? And so what that does for converters is, if you go to an inlay manufacturer that has these quality certifications, you know that it's a trusted source and you're getting product that really has been vetted and continues to get vetted every year. It's a continuous improvement cycle that we go through.
Good stuff. So another question coming out. The converter wanting to get into medium to long runs of labels with RFID. What equipment do they need to support the press? And on the press, what do they need?
I think this is one that we talked about, maybe supplying some longer answers offline after the call. So we can talk about this here at a high level, but I think that'd be a really good one to really give some details later. You can do this offline, which I don't think is what this question is about, but there are pieces of equipment that you can use to insert the inlays at the proper point within the equipment you have today. Generally, if you're looking for long runs, that might get you straight into dry inlay insertion, because in the long run, if you're doing long runs like that, that's going to be the most efficient, cost-effective way to do it. Medium to short runs, that middle one that we showed before, the clear wet inlay, is a lot of where people start. But in each instance, you're going to have 5 to 10 options of equipment manufacturers and models that could do it for you.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a really good follow-up, like we were talking about. Are recyclers getting RFID readers for completing packaging circularity? That's another question. That's a lot of
great question. Not yet, but that will be a great future. Sustainability, circularity, RFID has a lot of potential there, and that's something that we're definitely looking at actively. Is how can you a couple different things. First, how can we use post-consumer waste to actually create these inlays if we have like a paper substrate, etc.? How do we minimize what we're using, that impact? Secondly, can it be recycled? If you make a label to go on a certain type of material product, make sure that when that product is thrown out, it can easily go into the recycle stream without any issues. So that's something that we're proud to be releasing this year and beyond. We've been talking about that quite a bit. In fact, we even have a new compostable inlay, which is really cool. It's a paper.
Oh, really?
And it actually just gets composted with the material. And then, but circularity, that's really the holy grail. And that's where we see this connecting the physical to the digital. That's where this is going, is if you can have an idea at the end of the life of something and you can turn it in, then you know what to do with it. You know what the content is of that item. You can know what the history is. You can recycle it appropriately, etc. So I know we're in the U.S. talking today, but in Europe they've got their digital passport, DPP, and so that's a lot where that discussion's going as well.
And those are great points. And there's one I would add to that, is that not only in packaging, and maybe not for this audience, but you're going to see it into the products themselves.
Yes.
Right. So what can we do so we know that product's life cycle? One, it starts off with anti-counterfeit, but second, it goes to the idea that it's not a single-use product. It's going to have a life past the first consumer who purchases it. They may resell it. They may send it back to the manufacturer who refurbishes it. But how do we watch that entire life cycle? And RFID is a great way to gather that information.
Okay, so another question is the waste coming off the press, the waste that the converter has to deal with. Do they have to do special things to get rid of that? Do they need to handle it differently than the regular waste?
Sorry, you mean like if it's RFID labeled? I didn't quite understand.
Right. If you've got labels and you've got you've die cut it incorrectly, and now you've got to throw all this stuff away, you know? So can you just throw it in the trash?
I mean, you can throw it in the trash, of course. There's been a lot of recyclability. Look, it's going to depend. Most inlays would be fine. There are some that we find that if you really want to make sure you can recycle it, etc. If you've got a really big chunk of aluminum there, that's what we run into, is there's physically some material there. But besides that, it's just like any other label that you are recycling. And we do have the first APR recognized recyclable official label. So that's very cool.
Nice. So what happens to the aluminum in the APR process? And this is
it does, in that specific process, it usually gets thrown out. The aluminum does, and it would degrade at that point. But it's not interfering with the rest of the recycling of the plastic.
Okay, that's exciting.
Yeah, I think the bigger question for that is the substrate that the aluminum is on. And by default, a lot of times you see it's on a PET. And when you're looking for something that's biodegradable or can be compostable or whatever, you can move to a paper-based substrate and put aluminum or a different conductive material onto the paper base. And those are the discussions around sustainability and recycling. And that could be we could have a 3-day session on that.
Oh, I know. And you know, could you put a varnish down underneath the inlay or the antenna and then have it release in the solution?
How it releases from the product it goes on is that's day 1 of the 3-day session. Yeah.
Nice. From an inventory management perspective for a client who with finished products in tubes, boxes, and bottles, what would be the best strategy for that, I guess, the label?
Is this for selecting the right RFID label?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have to do also with how are you going to do the inventory management? What kind of reader would you have? Will you have a handheld reader? That's usually the first entry point, is you buy a handheld reader. You can take it anywhere in your facility. You can go up to items and quickly read the dozens or hundreds of items. So once you understand that, you know what kind of read distance you have. Because if you have a fixed infrastructure, of course, you have to read much further in that case. So there's some cases that's worth the money, but just assume you have a handheld. Then you look at what's the material of these tubes, boxes, and bottles. Is there any material inside of it that's going to block that signal? And then you go to your suite of inlays, just like Mcleod was showing, to say, okay, what's the best fit? Is it a cardboard box type? Does it have to be really strong all purpose? That's great near all materials. So that would be the best strategy. But Mcleod, how do you approach this sort of question?
I think you hit it. Those are the first questions that we asked too, right? I think you hit it, because we talk a lot about the inlay and about the labels, and that's the data carrier. But the data collection side, what's the infrastructure that's going to be pulling it from it, is really important. And so if you would talk to that client just to say, let's talk about your use case, and we can kind of build things up from there.
Okay.
And that's something that we would absolutely raise our hands to participate in that conversation to help.
Sure. So I'm the guy, right? I've just got this stuff going. I got my Mark Andy press or Neil Peter, you know, whatever, Omet. What, I don't want anybody to be offended. I've got my press, my flexographic narrow web press, and I've got my product. How do I determine which direction to put it on? How, you know, does it go wide, sideways, or, you know, what do I do with all that?
And I think it's almost the same answer that Elizabeth gave, right? So let's look at that use case. Is that product going to be, you know, what's the, and I'm forgetting the retail word for it, but how am I putting it on the shelves, right? Is it going to be stacked, merchandising, or the planogram, or whatever I'm thinking of, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then how am I going to be reading it? So does that mean that I'm going to incorporate it into the prime label because it's in a good spot? Do I need a secondary label that's in a different spot that might be more RF friendly for that? But it's a similar conversation to what we talked about with the other one, with the tubes and boxes.
Okay. And you've got some kind of, I assume you have some stock constructions for specific Is it going to be on a tube, or is it going to be on whatever, or is it going to be on rubber or water?
In each industry, you've got standard label sizes, like the hang tag on the T-shirt that Elizabeth mentioned, or the pressure-sensitive labels going on poly bags that have a bunch of socks in them, or the fold over on a pair of jeans. And what we've tried to do is design something that fits into the pre-existing labels that are there, the kind of the prime labels that are there. So we're not adding something else and screwing up somebody's branding by putting a white label on top of it.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
And one thing to add there too, because that's super well said. These larger RFID programs that you might hear about, pretty much all of them as part of integrating RFID into their end use, they have some kind of playbook that says for this type of item, for this category, this is what we recommend. And so there usually is some starting point with those established programs. So you're not starting from scratch.
One would think. I know some people that just say, "Hey, you do RFID? This is what it is," and they have no idea.
I think there's always also, like in the RFID world, there's always the kind of quick and dirty, like, well, I don't know what to do, throw a dog bone on it or something like that. Like
Yeah.
we've got our largest label size, which is like 1x4, just fills up the whole space with antenna. If you slap that on almost anything except for direct on metal, it's going to read. So you have those kind of options too. It's like do overkill until you can get it to be elegant. But most end users want it to be much more elegant than that.
Right. But there are, so what, I guess both of you guys have teams behind you. So if Joe Label comes and says, I've got, Bobby shoe salesman, and he doesn't have any idea, they can contact somebody on your team, and you guys can direct him, steer
Absolutely.
him out of trouble.
And those are conversations we have all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got whole teams of people to have those conversations for sure. Happy to help.
How much more risk is there when providing RFID labels when it comes to, and then, oh my goodness. This is screaming. When it comes to quality issues, etc., how does the converter take on a greater responsibility, or does the converter take on a greater responsibility with quality control and all that jazz if you've got a RFID label on the back of it?
And we talked about yields earlier, right? And then there is some opportunity or risk for damage to happen in the converting process, even when you're starting with 100% good. But outside of that, what we do is if we see something in the field that doesn't look right, something that's outside of that 0.5% or less failure rate that that would not raise an eyebrow. We've got folks that can take a look at some of those tags that didn't read or didn't perform as expected, 3D microscopes and guys that can dig all the way into it and look at how it bonded. Is this an anomaly? Is this an actual failure? Or what may have happened? So I don't know if that's exactly the answer to the question, but I think that I don't think it adds any kind of onerous additional responsibility.
Well, and two, if I'm getting into it and I'm just starting out, can I run, what's the lowest number I can run? 20, 30, and then send them to you guys and have you check them?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, kind of a note I made to myself before as we were heading into this is one of the best practices when you do get up and running is you're going to want to test at the end of the line, right? Mm-hmm. So you have that, and you can say to that customer, when it came off my line, I was at 99.8 or I was at 100%. So, that's just a great data point to have when you're trying to do that reverse engineering of what might have gone wrong.
Okay. So now the dirty question. What's the cost of entry for this? Are we talking 20,000 bucks? Are we talking 100,000, 200,000? If I want to, and two, if I want to load a press and start doing this in line, what am I looking at speed? What am I looking at? Just ranges. I won't hold you to any of this. The viewers, man.
The guy who runs my field application engineering team always just says, "Yeah, we can do it. How much money you got?" But that's not the answer you want to hear right now. We talked about how you can do it offline. You can do kind of a baby steps inline, and you can go full bore, at 500 feet a minute. You can start in the 5 figures. You can do something more efficient, a little bit faster in low 6 figures, and then you can spend a few $1,000,000 for something that's just going to churn out, millions per week if you need to. So it's not a great answer, but there is a great range, and yet another thing that we could provide some answers at length offline.
Okay. And that would be something that you guys would help the converter get going with? They would talk to you?
We have relationships that we can make connections.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Any last words to put it in a real, dark way?
RFID is a great opportunity, and we look forward to having more converters enter the space. And please pick up the phone, reach out to your sales rep locally, and let's see what we can do.
Absolutely. It's great to see so many questions coming through. We're happy to answer as many more as you got.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are interested in this.
Yep.
Like to hear from smart folks like y'all. So thanks for being here. We appreciate you. And I'll throw it back to Michaeli.
Awesome. Yes, echoing what Mike said, thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you to our attendees for all the great questions. This has been recorded, so we'll put the recording in TLMI community, and we're also doing a Tech Connect article from some of the answers that have been asked today, and we'll post that next month as a blog or article that you all will also get access to. That will be in TLMI community as well. So thanks again for being here, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.